today, the Prime Minister will meet with China's President Xi Jinping. The two leaders have met 3 times before, but this one will be perhaps the most important given the growing influence of Donald Trump and the tariff war that is raging. Our political correspondent Cam Redden is live in Beijing. Amongst this tariff backdrop, of course, China is at the centre of it, is really the main target from the United States. So this changes our relationship in many ways. It changes the economic equation. And this will be the main event today for the PM, won't it?
Damn.
Absolutely, Laura. We know that earlier in the year, remember, China and the United States at one point had reciprocal tariffs above 120% imposed on one another. They came to something of an impasse and managed to negotiate that down, get something of a deal. But when these new round of Trump tariffs kick in on August 1, there is a real feeling that that is the moment that things will change, not just between the United States and China, but what that will mean for all of the US and all of China's trading partners. One of the most important ones, of course, being Australia. Yesterday was about meeting with business leaders in Shanghai, but today for the Prime Minister, it will be about meeting with the political leaders of China, including with the President Xi Jinping inside the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, which overlooks Tiananmen Square, really the heart of Chinese politics here in its biggest city. In terms of what the Prime Minister wants to put on that agenda, Laura, naturally trade, economics, that will be the key focus, the impact of tariffs from Donald Trump, but also he wants to talk up the removal of China's $20 billion sanctions that had been imposed on Australia over the last few years. Remember, they haven't met since the last of those tariffs or sanctions were removed, so that will be a focus as well. The Prime Minister has talked up wanting to get greater cooperation on climate change, meeting targets that were set out under the Paris Agreement. And in terms of what else may be on that...
Good luck. You're going to negotiate with China around climate change. Literally a country that will open up a freaking coal plant every day if they need to supply their people power. Albanese, you're freaking having a laugh, mate.
That agenda, naturally, it's kept quite close to the Prime Minister's chest to date, but that Chinese naval and military activity in our region, we think of the live fire exercises in the Tasman Sea earlier this year, as well as the partial circumnavigation of a Chinese vessel around Australia. 2 topics that the Prime Minister...
And ever since that Chinese circumnavigation around Australia, South Australia has had one of the biggest marine ecological disasters in the history of this state, from human record, I believe. It's insane. There's a marine dying off every day, washed up on the beach. Ever since that Chinese thing happened.
May seek to raise, as well as the fate and the case of the Australian academic young Hengjun. He is serving a suspended death sentence here in China, has been detained for the best part of 6 years now. The Prime Minister not elaborating on what or how he might raise that case in this meeting, but he said yesterday that he will raise the case of Australians in all parts of the world, whether that's at home in the United States or indeed here in China.
So there's a lot on the agenda, Cam. The Prime Minister will need to prioritise what he wants to get out of this and actually what the outcomes are. What should we be looking out for in terms of whether this meeting is a success or not? Obviously, Port of Darwin is pretty delicate, among other things.
Yeah, and if we can glean anything from the Chinese state media coverage of this visit, Laura, the Port of Darwin and what happens around this election promise from Labor to bring it back into Australian hands and end the 99-year lease of the Chinese company Landbridge, that will be the real concrete assurance, if you like, that the Prime Minister will look to stand by. There's been a real focus in the Chinese state media on the Port of Darwin. There's been some frustration expressed about the way that's been handled. The view broadly in China is that that lease should remain and that it does not need to come back into Australian hands, particularly now that the port is profitable. That's the line that's being pushed here. So we can expect President Xi to at least want to raise that in the meeting when they come together in the early afternoon Australian time. The Prime Minister asked directly about this yesterday, though. He notes that he will not, based on this answer at least, be personally raising the case of the Port of Darwin, but is expecting it to come up in some capacity. And when he does, or if it does, the Prime Minister says he'll stick to his position, but also give President Xi the courtesy, for lack of a better word, of hearing out his argument.
Interesting. It's going to be very interesting what happens at Port of Darwin.
Our position's very clear, and I'm sure that the President's very clear and is knowledgeable of that. I'll have a discussion with the President. I'll treat him with the respect that I would any leader of another country.
Okay.
So that will be high on President Xi's talking point agenda. Laura, in terms of what else he might be looking to get out of this conversation with Australia's Prime Minister, on trade, the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, that's reaching its 10th year of operation this year. The ambassador in Canberra had suggested he wants to see a review of that to expand it into other areas like artificial intelligence, which has been a big talking point amongst many of the business leaders gathered in Shanghai and Beijing, as well as other areas like healthcare and green energy too. But Laura, the inescapable reality of this meeting is that Washington will be watching it very closely. We've been waiting to see if there's a further response from the likes of Elbridge Colby or other members of the Trump team to whatever comes out of this conversation between the Prime Minister and China. It's been no real secret on this trip that there's a view that this is a big moment in the Prime Minister's leadership when it comes to managing that relationship and threading the diplomatic needle between our biggest trading partner, our most important economic partner, and also our most important defence ally in the United States.
Cam, thank you.
Yeah, look, that's true. It will be very interesting to see what Washington responds with the US in terms of Australia trying to strengthen their ties with China amid the US-Chinese tensions. It's going to be weird because Australia's, I'm reading here, deeply economic diplomatic engagement with China is the largest trading partner. 32.5% of our exports go to China. So it is deeply entrenched in what makes our economy in terms of trade. But yeah, the US is engaged in a trade war right now with China. We all know about that. So the tariffs as high as 145% on Chinese goods. So America, who's at war with China essentially with trade, and then seeing Australia, who's supposed to be the 53rd state, whatever they say the meme is. It's going to be really weird because America probably wants to keep Australia at bay, but Australia can't keep at bay if it wants to survive economically and actually thrive. We're not going to stay poor because of what America wants at the same time. So I guess China's recent military actions like the live fire exercise they spoke about in the Tasman Sea and naval task group circling Australia is really, really bad. And Australia's measured response to Chinese military maneuvers, emphasizing on freedom of navigation over Australia's confrontation, could frustrate US expectations for a stronger stance against China's regional assertiveness. So yeah, there's a lot of China is making itself known in these waters. These are our waters. Basically, it's I think essentially. So yeah, look, there's a lot of tension happening. Chinese influence on Australia, the US would be deeply concerned about the Chinese growing influence in Australia, in terms of agriculture, green energy, infrastructure. We mentioned Port of Darwin. So I'm sure Americans would want to be selling renewable technologies to Australia, but China will be like, no, we can sell it and we'll sell it much cheaper and we're much closer. So the US are probably looking at going, oh, there's a market we're missing out on. So I would say in summary though, Australia is going to do what's best for itself. America is going to be a little bit on guard. And Australia is potentially hedging on the AUKUS commitments in response to China's military assertiveness is probably the biggest thing, and the risk of Chinese influence throughout the whole country. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm just kind of blabbering on here, but what do you guys think? Are you concerned about growing Chinese influence in Australia? Should we be concerned? Or should Australia just dive deep into the three big economies that are merging, China, India, and Indonesia, and try and get as much money as we can?